7 Johnny Carson guests who were actually addicts tells a story that stretches across 3 decades of American television. When Johnny Carson invited the nation's biggest stars into living rooms every night. His warm smile, calm presence, and easy laughter made audiences feel as though they were watching old friends casually catching up over coffee. Yet beneath the relaxed banter and seemingly spontaneous humor, there was often a darker reality unfolding in real time. Many of Carson's most memorable guests were fighting private wars that viewers at home never saw, desperate struggles with addiction that sometimes surfaced subtly, sometimes alarmingly, right there on the couch. Johnny Carson possessed an extraordinary instinct for human vulnerability, as former producers and staff later revealed. He could sense when a guest was using alcohol or drugs to mask pain, and depending on the situation, he would either shield them by steering the conversation toward safer ground or gently push just enough to expose the truth beneath the polished exterior. Carson had an unmatched ability to make intoxicated guests appear composed, stepping in with a perfectly timed joke when they rambled or smoothly changing the subject when conversations veered toward dangerous territory. Most viewers never realized they were watching Carson perform a kind of high-wire rescue operation live on television. To understand this fully, it begins with one of America's most beloved comedians, a man who dazzled audiences night after night, while hiding a dependency that would eventually nearly kill him, and why Carson seemed to be one of the few people who truly saw through the carefully constructed facade. When Richard Pryor walked onto Johnny Carson's stage, audiences witnessed a comedic force unlike anything television had ever produced. His rapid-fire delivery, razor-sharp social commentary, and extraordinary ability to transform personal pain into universal humor made him far more than a comedian. He was a cultural revolution embodied in one man. He could confront racism, poverty, violence, and trauma while making audiences laugh, a balancing act no one before or since has matched. What viewers did not realize was that many of Pryor's most brilliant appearances occurred during periods of severe addiction, a dependency that would later culminate in his infamous self-immolation incident during a drug-induced psychosis. Staff members recalled how Carson could immediately tell when Pryor was using heavily, noticing manic energy, darting eyes, and moments when Pryor's focus suddenly drifted. Yet even in the grip of addiction, Pryor's genius remained intact, sometimes seeming almost amplified. What makes these appearances especially poignant in hindsight is how clearly Carson recognized the demons Pryor was battling. In several interviews during the mid-1970s, Carson subtly redirected conversations away from topics that might trigger Pryor's self-destructive tendencies and stepped in to cover moments when Pryor briefly lost his train of thought. A 1977 interview stands out, where Pryor is visibly high and rambling, yet Carson intervenes with simple, grounding questions that allow him to regain his footing. After Pryor's self-immolation, Carson approached the subject with rare sensitivity, allowing Pryor to address it on his own terms, and moving on when it became clear the topic was too painful. Pryor later acknowledged that Carson was one of the few hosts who never exploited his vulnerabilities for cheap laughs. Despite multiple attempts at recovery, addiction continued to haunt Pryor, contributing to his declining health and eventual death, leaving Carson's interviews as a haunting glimpse into a struggle that extended far beyond the cameras. When Judy Garland appeared on The Tonight Show in the early 1960s, viewers saw both the twilight of a legend and Carson's remarkable ability to care for a guest whose fragility was unmistakable. Though the public still associated her with the innocent image of Dorothy, Garland had been trapped in a cycle of prescription drugs and alcohol since her teenage years at MGM, where studios used amphetamines to control her weight and barbiturates to help her sleep. By the time she sat across from Carson, she had lived nearly 3 decades within this destructive cycle. Carson treated Garland with extraordinary gentleness, never exploiting her disjointed responses or occasional slurred speech. Instead, he adjusted his entire interviewing style, asking simpler questions, laughing appreciatively at incoherent answers, and subtly drawing attention to himself when Garland seemed lost. Carson understood that her addiction was not a moral failure, but the result of a studio system that had medicated her for profit. He continued to give Garland a platform even when other shows considered her too risky for live television, preserving her dignity and celebrating her immense talent. Her final appearance occurred just months before her death from an accidental overdose, and even then Carson ensured she was treated with respect, allowing audiences to see the legend rather than just the decline. What he offered Garland was not just professionalism, but human decency at a time when she received very little of it. Dean Martin's appearances on Carson's stage presented a different kind of complexity. With a drink in hand and a relaxed grin, Martin embodied carefree sophistication, cultivating the image of a charming drunk who floated effortlessly through life. This persona was carefully constructed, designed to protect the man behind it. While Martin's onstage intoxication was often exaggerated for effect, over time the line between performance and reality blurred, and his drinking increased. By the late 1960s and 1970s, Martin was what addiction specialists would call a functioning alcoholic, capable of performing at a high level while quietly deteriorating behind the scenes. Carson, who shared his own complicated relationship with alcohol, engaged Martin with a quiet understanding, never directly addressing his drinking even when Martin joked about it. In a revealing 1975 appearance, Martin made an unusually candid remark about needing a drink just to feel normal. Carson acknowledged it with a brief nod and swiftly redirected the conversation, recognizing the truth beneath the humor without exposing it. As Martin aged, the physical toll of decades of drinking became more visible, though his charm remained intact. Audiences laughed, unaware they were watching a man trapped by a persona that made confronting his addiction nearly impossible. Truman Capote's recurring appearances brought both brilliance and discomfort. The diminutive author with the flamboyant voice and sharp wit was unpredictable television gold, offering dazzling insights and shocking candor. Yet by the mid-1970s, Capote was deeply entangled in alcohol, prescription drugs, and cocaine. Carson could immediately detect when Capote was impaired, noticing glazed eyes, slurred speech, and commentary that veered from amusing to potentially destructive. In these moments, Carson stepped in with jokes, topic changes, or even commercial breaks to protect Capote from himself. In one notable 1979 appearance, Capote began telling a dangerous story about Jackie Kennedy, and Carson smoothly redirected the conversation before lasting damage could be done. As Capote's addiction worsened, it undermined the very talent that had made him famous, leaving him unable to complete his next major work.